Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our channel Unison of Geekshow. My name is Sanskriti, and today we are going to discuss about a famous novel of 1860, that is The Woman in White. We are going to discuss the novel The Woman in White. So we were going to discuss the abstract and the summary basically. So it is like Midnight Encounter by artist Walter Hartwright takes a position as drawing master for two young ladies at Limberger House, a large estate in Lake District in the north of England. On the evening before his departure, Walter visits his mother and sister in Hampstead Heath. He decides to walk back home across the heath, where a young woman dressed entirely in white stops him to ask for directions to London. She seems upset, and Walter offers to accompany her. She accepts, but only on the condition that he will never leave when and how she decides. Walter promises. And they continue on their journey. Walter tells her that he is leaving London for Cumberland in the morning. And to his surprise, he finds the woman knows Limbridge House and had good memories of the place and family there. In particular, the late Mrs. Fairley, as they reach the edge of London, Walter manages to get a carriage for the women and they part ways. Only 10 minutes later, two men in an open carriage pass Walter. They stop a policeman. Walter overhears them asking him whether he has seen a woman dressed in white. They tell him she has escaped from an asylum. At Limberge House, Walter travels to the Lake District and takes up the position as drawing master for the intelligent and resolute Marian Holcombe and her beautiful and gentle half-sister Laura Fairley. The two women are orphans, daughter of the same father but different mothers. They now live with their eccentric and self-centered bachelor uncle, Mr. Frederick Fairley, who considers himself to be an invalid and unable to deal with anything that might upset him even slightly. He spends all the time in this darkened room with his coin and art collections. And apart from a brief initial meeting, Walter doesn't see him at all during the stay in Limberge. The first person Walter meets is Marian, and he spends his first night at Limberge House with her as Laura is not well enough to join them. Their conversation turns to Walter's mysterious encounter with the woman in white on Hampstead Heath. He tells Marian about the woman connection to Limberge House and to Mrs. Fairley, Laura's mother. Intrigued, Marian agrees to help him find out more about the women. Installed. Marian goes through Mrs. Farrell's old letters to her husband to see if she mentions anything that might shed some light on the mysterious woman. Marian finally finds a reference to Mrs. Catherick and her little girl Anne, who came to the village to look after Mrs. Catherick's sister. Mrs. Catherick asked Mrs. Fairley if Anne could attend school while they were staying in the village. Mrs. Fairley agreed. When she met Anne, she was struck by how similar Anne looked to her own daughter Laura, and she decided to take Anne under her wing. She gave her some of Laura's old white dresses and thus started an obsession with dressing in white. A token of eternal gratefulness to Mrs. Fairley's for her kindness. From the letter, Walter and Marian also learned that Anne had learning difficulties and slight mental handicap. They asked Laura if she remembers Anne, but Laura only has weak memories of the time. The investigation grind to a halt. Star-crossed lovers. Over the first few months, Marian, Laura, and Walter spent much time together. Laura and Walter began to fall in love with one another. However, Laura's father wished for Laura to marry Sir Periwinkle Clyde, a baronet from the south of England. Laura never questioned or resented the arrangement before, but now, as she begins to realize that she has feelings for Walter, her situation becomes increasingly difficult. Marian begins how Laura struggles, asks Walter to leave Limberidge House as soon as possible for both their estates. Before Walter leaves, an anonymous letter arrives warning Laura not to marry Sir Percival and urging her to investigate his background. Walter and Marian upset that Marian Anne is the author of the letter. Walter decides to keep watch at Mrs. Ferry grave at the local cemetery in the hope that Anne might appear. When she does, he asks her why she doesn't want Laura to marry Sir Percival. But Anne is upset and anxious. Her companion, Mrs. Clements, soon ushers her away. None the wiser, Walter returns to Limberidge House a few days before Sir Percival arrives. Walter leaves, heartbroken and concerned about Laura's fate. He signs for an expedition to Central America and leaves England shortly after. The husband-to-be. Deeply troubled by Anne's letter, Marian determines to find all she can about Sir Percival. She even asks their family solicitor, Mr. Gilmore, to do some digging. But neither are able to discover anything that might tarnish Sir Percival's impeccable reputation. When Sir Percival arrives at Limberidge Hall, he presents himself as a perfect gentleman, and Marian can't find fault with him. Even when she challenges us about the involvement with Anne and her claim that she was being held in the asylum against her will, he explains that arrangement has made with Anne's mother, who used to be service for a member of his family. Seeing how Mrs. Catherine has struggled with her mentally disabled daughter, in particular after her husband had abandoned her, the Perwinkle felt an obligation towards her and generously offered to pay for a private asylum. To clear her doubt, he urges Mariam to send letters to Massachusetts to confirm the story, which she does. The prayer is short and confirms her Perwinkle's story. The date for the wedding is set, and Mr. Glamour starts putting together a marriage contract. It is to the point that Sir Perwinkle starts to show his real color. He insists on being the sole heir to Laura's fortune in case and she dies without having children. Sir Gilmore, unwilling to set up such a deal, appeals to Mr. Frehley, but he refuses to get involved and chooses the way of least resistance. Mr. Gilmore is forced to agree to Sir Perwinkle conditions for the marriage contract, and Laura obediently marries Sir Perwinkle at Backwater Park. After a 6-month honeymoon in Italy, Laura and Sir Perwinkle return to his Blackwater Park estate in Hampshire. Sir Perwinkle has agreed that Mariam may live with him, and with the two sisters he right. Laura refuses to talk about her marriage, but it's clear that she's deeply unhappy. Soon, Mariam realizes that she formerly charming and unacceptable behavior Sir Percival, in fact, a violent and short-tempered brute, in particular with dealings with servants. The two other guests at Sir Percival's estate are the Count and Countess Fosco. Count Fosco, a corpulent Italian nobleman, is a close friend of Sir Percival's, and the Countess is Laura's and Mariam's aunt, Mr. Ferry's sister. Laura detests Count Fosco but won't tell Mariam the reason why. Mariam herself can't help but be charmed by him. He's intelligent, well-read, and excellent company, and he seems to be only one with influence over Sir Percival. However, Mariam soon realizes that he is even more dangerous and powerful than Sir Percival. While the latter tries to achieve his goals through violence and rudeness, Count Fosco exerts his power through diplomacy and cunning. He exactly knows how to play with his adversaries. The more often he intervenes with Sir Percival on Laura and Mariam's behalf, the more worried she becomes. Mariam urges Laura not to show her dislike of the Count. Money troubles. Sir Percival has a lot of debt. He tries to force Laura to sign a document without allowing her to see its content. She suspects that it has to do with her money and refuses. Sir Percival is furious and gets aggressive. Fosco intervenes and manages to calm his friend. Marian immediately springs into action and writes to Sir Gilmore's partner, Mr. Carroll, who has taken on Sir Gilmore's clients after the old lawyer's retirement. She wants to determine Laura's legal rights in this situation. The reply arrives the next day, advising not to sign anything, but defying Sir Percival's proves to be unnecessary. On her way back from receiving her letter, Mariam sees Count Fosco, who tells her that Sir Percival has agreed to give Laura a few more months to decide whether to sign the document or not. One day, Laura finds Anne waiting for her at a boathouse near Lake at the estate and tells Laura that she knows a secret that it will allow Laura to leave her husband. Because she could confide in Laura, Anne realizes that someone has been following them and runs away after quickly arranging meet with Laura again. However, when Laura arrives at the boathouse the next time Sir Percival is waiting for her, he turns violent, takes her back to the house, and locks her in the room. Again, it is only because of Count Fosco's intervention that Mariam is allowed to see her sister. They decide to write another letter to Mr. Carroll about to get his legal advice regarding Sir Percival's violent behavior and spend second letter to Mr. Farrelly asking him to allow Laura to back to Lambridge House. They asked Laura's maid Fanny, whom Sir Percival had dismissed in anger and immediate effect, to take the letters as they don't trust Count Fosco. The following night, Marian clambers on the veranda roof to eavesdrop on Sir Cavalier and Fosco. She finds that despite their careful planning, Count Fosco has managed to intercept the letters and destroy the letter to Mr. Kyle. She also learns that both Count Fosco and Sir Percival are after Laura's money. Their next step is to find Anne, so she couldn't tell Laura or Marian's Sir Percival's secret. Before she could warn Laura and act, Marian falls ill and with a serious cold caused by rain and chill while she was crouching at the roof. She falls into weeks-long delirium. Count Fosco travels to Lambridge to persuade Mr. Farrell to allow Laura to return. The Count suggests that she should stay at their house in London on the way there. Desperate to get rid of the talkative Italian, Mr. Farrell agrees. Back at Blackwater House, Marian is still fighting for their life in a cunning ploy. For Count Fosco and Sir Percival move her to an unoccupied part of the house, which she is delirious. They can tell Laura and Mariam has left for Lambridge Park and is currently waiting to follow at Count Fosco's house in London. Laura doesn't trust them but agrees to travel to London. Days later, she's confirmed dead and is buried in Lambridge. And Sir Percival and Count Fosco inherit Laura's fortune. After a year in Central America, Walter returns to England and learns Laura dead. Deep in mourning, he travels to Laura's grave in Lambridge only to meet Mariam and Laura. Mariam tells him what happened after Laura's departure to London. Shortly after Mariam recovered from illness, she learned that Laura has died. Determined to discover Sir Percival's secret, she went to the asylum to which Anne has returned to speak to the women. However, when she entered, she found that the person she thought would be Anne was none other than Laura. Mariam managed to bribe the nurse and escaped with Laura. They went to Lambridge to prove that Mr. Farrelly that she was alive, but he refused to accept her. The trauma of her time at Blackwater has changed her almost beyond recognition. Walter and Mariam and Laura take up false names and move to a small apartment in rundown part of London. Walter swears that he will do everything he can to restore Laura to her rightful place and identity. Together with Mariam, he starts putting together a letter account of what has happened. From Mrs. Clements, they learn how Count Fosco tricked Anne into coming to his house, where he introduced her to his household as Laura, Lady Glyde. When Anne died suddenly, everyone in the household believed that it has been Laura, who all the while has been sequestered away in the asylum under Anne's name. Their efforts, however, are in vain. When Walter takes their findings to Mr. Clare, the sociolator tells him that their case couldn't stand up in a court of law as Laura is unable to remember much about her journey to London or the day before Count Fosco and Sir Percival committed her to the asylum. The only thing that could help Laura recover her identity would be to prove that she traveled to London after the real name Anne has died. However, neither Laura or the housekeeper of Blackwater, Elizabeth Mickelson, can remember the date. Despite their attempts to stay in incognito, Walter soon learns that Sir Percival's agents are following him. He refuses to be imitated and continues to his quest. He visits Mrs. Catwick to ask her about Sir Percival's secret in the hope that it might give him the opportunity to blackmail Sir Percival into confessing to his evil deed. Mrs. Catwick is in pleased to see Walter nothing less and she invites him in. While she refuses to tell him anything, in a bout of anger, she lets slip bitter commitment about Sir Percival's family on his mother's side. Walter decides to follow him lead and check the marriage register at the local church. He finds that Sir Percival's parents were never married, meaning that his claims to Blackwater and the title are false. However, before Walter can retrieve the register as proof, Percival, in desperate attempt to keep his secret, entrusts the church to burn the book. Percival starts the fire, but then becomes trapped in the building and burns to death. The loss of the register and Percival's death mean that Walter and Miriam still have no way of proof that Laura traveled to London after Anne was confirmed dead. In a last desperate attempt to restore Laura's identity, Walter goes after Count Fosco, aware that he's taking on powerful, cunning foe. Walter talks to Miriam about learning Laura is wife. So he is a letter about to protect her. Also, with Laura gaining strength and becoming more like her former self, each day she rediscovers her love for Walter. The two marry. In preparation for taking on Count Fosco, Walter and Miriam collect every small detail they find about their foe. Walter is perplexed that Count Fosco has never returned his beloved Lee, even though his behavior and talk suggest that he misses his home country terribly. Walter considers if he has found a weak spot in Count Fosco's armor. On evening, Walter follows Count Fosco to the opera. Beginning along his good friend, Professor Pesca, who is Italian as well, Walter hopes that Pesca might recognize the Count and thus shed some light on his countryman's background. But Pesca is adamant that he never seen that Count before. However, Count Fosco's reaction to seeing Pesca is astounding. He freezes in fear and leaves the opera in rush during the intermission. Walter questions his friend to what might have caused Count Fosco's reaction. Recently, Pesca reveals that he is a part of a secret brotherhood and that it's likely that the Count is part of it as well. Pesca and Walter suspect the Count Fosco might have betrayed the brotherhood and now lives in fear of being executed as a traitor by one of the members. Walter has to act quickly. He decides to go to the Count's house and, as a safeguard, sends a letter containing Fosco's address to Pesca with instruction to open it in the morning, should Walter not have returned by then. Walter finds the Count packing ready to leave England. He forces Fosco to write a full confession, including the exact dates of Anne's death and Laura's arrival in his house in London. The next morning, Count Fosco and his wife leave, but they didn't get far. On a work trip to Paris, Walter learns that a huge man was found drowned in Seine. He visits the morgue and learns that the dead man is indeed Count Fosco. It seems that the Brotherhood found him after all. Walter, Laura, and Miriam return to Lembridge, and Mr. Frelly acknowledges the mistake and confirms Laura as his niece. Laura's name is removed from the gravestone and replaced with Anne. A year later, Laura and Walter have a son. Mr. Frelly dies a few months later from a stroke. Well, let's talk about the text, how it is texted, what is the structure of this and the style. There is an omniscient narrator in The Woman in White. Instead, the novel collates the viewpoints of different people who give their own perceptions and interpretation of events and people. This often results in conflicting reports, requiring the reader to decide whom to believe. The family lawyer, the housekeeper, and various other characters in the story also provide written reports. They are arranged in chronological order, and the reader uncovers Sir Percival and Count Fosco's evil plot together with Miriam and Walter. The novel covers 3 time periods. The first runs from Walter's initial encounter with the woman in white and his time at Lembridge, though to Laura's wedding and departure. The second part, told mainly from Miriam's perspective, covers the events at Blackwater up to Laura's apparent death. The final section allows Walter in his investigation to the happy ending at Lembridge. Colin's sensitivity and mastery of psychological insight allow him to create characters full of personality and depth, each with their own voice and language. Whether it's the polished tone of the upper class or the colloquial dialects of the common person, in the same he managed to convey the distinct atmospheres of different places, whether it is the ease and beauty of Limbridge or the oppressive and threatening mood of Blackwater. So interpretation of this novel is like The Women in White is highly structured and considered work. Every detailed characters, motives, and event has a dramatic function. It is directly related to the uncovering of the complex and multi-layered plot. While the main character, Walter Harriet, isn't professional detective such as Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, or Walter's investigative approach is equally methodical. The Woman in White isn't only a classic example of a sensational novel, but is also a deeply socio-critical. The expectation and conventions of Victorian society and the different social class provide not simply the background in front of which the novel plays out, rather they are integral elements to the plot. The position and rights of the women is a central theme in The Woman in White. Laura falls victim to the psychiatrical system of Victorian Britain that defranchises women to the extent that she dies in social death. Similarly, the previously rebellious and eccentric Countess Fosco becomes a docile and doting wife to overbearing husband. Both these characters stand in stark contrast to the intellectual and courageous Mariam. Restrictions and limitations imposed by class and gender weave their way through Colin's novel, while Mariam's character and Fosco's open and deep admiration of her, as well as Walter's marriage to Laura, offer a glimpse of hope for the impersonation of women and the breakdown of class barriers in the end. Neither is really achieved. Colin creates multi-layered and ambivalent characters. They don't fit easily into any mold. Thus, even though Fosco is the evil mastermind of the novel, Mariam can't help but find him fascinating and charming. Similarly, Walter desperately tries to save Pascal's life, and the man is trapped in a burning church. The novel juxtaposes and contrasts reason and emotion, while Walter and Mariam recognize Laura because of their emotional bond with her. Proving her existence to the rest of the world requires hard facts. However, it is their attachment to love for Laura that motivates them to approach their task in rational and methodical way. Historical background of the story is sensational fiction was a hugely popular genre in the mid-9th century. Colin's The Woman in White, together with Ellen Wood Lyne and Mary Elizabeth Brenton, Lady Aladay's Secret, was a fundamental establishment of this genre. Its trademarks were a theme of deception, crime, and illicit passion, often happening behind the closed doors of seemingly respectable household. Sensation fiction catered to the emerging mass market of middle-class readers. All authors weren't necessarily keen to have their works associated with them, despite many recognizing the mastery that went into assembling a succulent plot. The genre developed out of the romantic Gothic tradition famous for its theme of horror, the uncanny and explorer peppered with old crumbling castles, graveyard, extravagant villains, and vulnerable heroines. All this element played into a sensational novel, and The White Woman is a prime example. Its narrative technique and content follow in the footsteps of its immediate precedents, including, for example, Charlotte Bronner's Jane Eyre, James Hog's The Private Memoirs, and Confessions of a Justified Sinner, and Mary Stanley's Frankenstein. The emergence of sensational fiction coincided with the commercialization of the novel, which serialized publication in periodicals as well as lending libraries such as Moody's helped create. Also, British booksellers W.S. Smith started offering cheap reprints at station stores. The Women in White also slots into the emergence of detective novels following authors such as Edgar Allan Poe, whose short stories are considered first example of the detective genre. Poe's hero Dupin isn't a professional detective, but a gentleman detective who solves his cases through logical deduction. It is from the tradition that author Conan Doyle had eventually created from the first serial and professional hero detective Sherlock Holmes. The development of the story. The Collins inspiration for The Woman in White came from the 18th century criminal case in which a woman had imprisoned in a lunatic asylum and thought dead. Her brother inherited her fortune and a widow After her release, she was unable to prove her identity. The opening scene of Callan's novel may stem from a real encounter. One night, Collins met a distressed woman who has escaped from a man who mistreated her. Cullen carefully planned and constructed the plot of his novel. He had known for his consistent approach of writing, and he wrote and rewrote the text to ensure the sentences were clear as possible. He was careful to ensure that all the legal aspects of the case were accurate, relying as a professional advice as well as his own legal training. Like most 19th century novels, The Women Word was initially published in a serialized form. It first appeared between November 1859 and August 1860 in the weekly family periodical All the Year Round, founded by Collins' friend Charles Dickens. In 1860, The Women in White was published as a 3-volume novel, and its first print run sold out at the day of its publication. 6 initial prints run followed, and Collins added a new page in 1861 edition. So, as you can see, this is a very famous novel of that classic ones. So, we are going to. So, thank you for joining us. And yes, for more like this type of novels or any updates, you can follow us on our site, Unison of Geek Show on YouTube. Thank you.